Welcome to the Filmworks Way, where we dive deep into the world of commercial and film production in the great state of Texas. I'm Andrew Kilzer, and each episode I'm joined by a cast of Texas-based cinematographers, agency/client reps, surly crew members who never seem to have enough coffee, writers and more to talk about the art, business, and chaos of making great work. So whether you're on set, in a closet running post-production, or just love the craft, you're in the right place. Let's get rolling. Today I'm joined by two people that I've grown to really enjoy being around over the last year or so. Aaron Reese and Justin Montgomery. How's it going today, guys?
Great.
Awesome.
So Aaron, why don't you tell me who you are, what you do, and what you have going on these days?
Sure. I'm Aaron Reese. I'm a producer. We worked together on a couple projects last year and this year. Let's see. I'm a commercial producer. I've done series and episodic. I've also done a lot of documentary. So a lot of what I'm working on is in those genres and love what I do.
I feel like a lot of the time, Aaron, I'm pulling you in on like wild, harebrained development ideas. And I'm pretty sure one day you're just going to not take my call because I'm like pulling you in on something that... What'd you say?
That's where you're wrong, Andrew. Well, I'm the type of person that you'll call a week before on a major holiday in the middle of a hurricane and say, we need to film a national commercial. And I'm like, I was born for this. Let's go.
I can very much vouch for that you were made for doing big work with a hurricane on either side of that.
Thank you.
And Justin, who are you? What do you have going on these days?
Yeah, so my name's Justin Montgomery. I'm a cinematographer, based mainly in Texas. But yeah, I have commercial experience in commercial, music video, narrative, and yeah. Right now, I'm wrapping up some music videos. Just wrapped up a music video in Paris in January. And yeah, other than that, just living the dream, enjoying it.
What I've learned about you, Justin, is that you are willing to go wherever, and you really you're probably the best creative I know at continually reaching out to people like, hey, I've got some time. You want to do some work? Hey, I've got some space on my calendar. You have anything I can jump on? Which, you know, for me, it's oftentimes the squeaky wheel gets the grease. And so having somebody reaching out is always a helpful thing to have.
Yeah, I got a good outreach game, for sure.
And your Instagram game. We were talking just before we started rolling. I think Aaron and I have both probably gotten some wins just because you post on Instagram better than I do, at the very least.
I'm not even on Instagram, so there you go.
Yeah. I
need you guys for that.
I've been tagging y'all for the last 6 months, basically since we wrapped the commercial.
Hey, I'll take it. We'll take all the pub we can get. Okay, so the way I want to start the show today is with a little bit of news that's going on in the Texas film industry. You said you're mostly based here in Texas, Justin, and Aaron, I know you work out of Houston. The big news right now is that the Texas legislature is meeting, and they meet, if you don't understand how this works, they meet every other year. It's always an odd calendar years, and so the legislature it's in front of them right now to up the Texas Film Incentive Program from $200 million a year up to $500 million a year. Aaron, I know you've worked on some projects that have gotten some film incentive dollars. What's that experience been like, and what do you think, more than doubling this amount of money is going to do for the film industry in the state?
Admittedly, I haven't read the legislation yet. However, I mean, does anyone? I will say from the 200 million to a 500 million jump would be huge. My experience when I first started producing and even production managing and coordinating, I worked on a lot of national commercials. And so you get a lot of high-end companies like, Toronto-based, BMW, whoever. And if they're looking to make a really high-scale project, Houston, amongst other cities in Texas, I mean, Texas as a whole, but in my experience, Houston is really willing and able and capable to take on that type of production size and scope and scale it for whatever they need. Like, we'll shut down half of our downtown if they need it for a cool driving shot. What that does is it creates so much work for all the locals and all the local production companies, all of the gear rental houses, and especially our hospitality industry. Like our hotels, I mean, we can work on a 3-day BMW commercial, but it's like 30 days of work for production teams. and they can ingest easily $1 million into our economy during that time. So even though it's only a 3-day shoot, it's an extraordinary amount of money sometimes for, our city and our workers. And then you file, the production company files and gets the incentive money paid back as a thank you, basically, for coming to shoot here in Texas. So it incentivizes a lot of these companies. If you're BMW and you want to shoot a commercial in downtown, you've got options all over the globe. Why Houston? So we need to have those selling points in order to attract more of those dollars to come here. And that's a big win for all of us, because then it's how we stay in business. It's how we all pay our bills. So I hope it passes. I hope the state can afford it. I hope, I know from my experience that if it does pass, it will really impact people like me, and specifically, experts and technicians in the Texas region.
Yeah, there's a stat out there right now that says for every dollar spent on production, it results in about $4.70 of economic impact for the city where the work is being done. And so, again, I'm not an economist, but you can really kind of see that playing out, because this isn't work that's going to go to one-man bands, right? It's going to go to a team of 30 people driving around the entire city of Houston or Austin or Fort Worth, right? And it's going to mean that there's people in the catering industry, people in the hotel industry, even from car rentals and, like you said, rental houses with camera and equipment and all that stuff. It really does kind of build it out. From a creative standpoint, Justin, what about Texas is a really appealing sort of visual backdrop for stories? When you think about our state, when you think about what we have to offer, and not just the cities, Houston, Austin, Dallas, but think about just the landscapes. Like, what does that kind of do as a cinematographer for you to tell stories in a really beautiful way?
Well, I'm based mainly in Austin, and I feel like it's kind of like this center for independent production. And what's great about it is that we're kind of in the middle of Texas, and you can drive 2 hours west and you get these beautiful rolling hills. Or if you go all the way out, you can go to where they filmed No Country for Old Men. So I think what's great about Texas is that we have all these like tiny small towns that offer like a lot of character, and the local people are really glad for just a film crew to be there. So I feel like you can get away with shooting in these like really cool old school locations, or like these places with character, because not a lot is shooting. So when someone comes around, they're like, "Oh, I'm just happy to have a camera going."
I agree that the best part about somewhere like Austin is you look at some of these old maps that the film studios in California produced in the earlier part of the last century. And they sort of looked at the whole state of California, and they had picked out, like, this looks like somewhere off of the Amalfi Coast. This looks like the Saharan Desert. This looks like, the forests of Eastern Europe or whatever. And I feel like Texas has enough sort of landscapes and enough sort of visual cues that you can make a lot of different work here, a lot of different visuals and a lot of different concepts work in the state. One really interesting thing I heard recently is that Great American Media signed a deal with Buffalo, New York. Okay, you wouldn't imagine Buffalo, New York to be sort of this production hub, right? But they signed a 10-film deal with Buffalo, New York, because the city was willing to add an extra 13 to 15% tax incentive on top of what the state was already giving.
For them.
And so effectively, they're going to make 10 films and get about 50% back in rebates. What a win for that city and for the crews up in that area. But when you think about it, it's really a matter of the state of Texas stepping up and saying, we're going to level the playing field for the crews and the creatives that are here in the state to match what, Louisiana, Georgia, New York, California, some of these other places around the country have already been willing to do in an effort to just bring more work here for all of us to do. So, my hope is that it's going to mean more work for all of us and more sort of varied concepts and ways to kind of push into the things we want to do. But really the reason I wanted to have you both on today is because we produced a national ad this last year for Texas A&M University. The concept was Stand, and we're going to go ahead and roll it right now so the viewers and the listeners can hear it and not see it, or see it, not hear it. I don't know, but we're going to go ahead and do that right now.
What does Texas A&M University stand for? We stand for excellence, respect, and loyalty. We stand for leadership, integrity, and selfless service. At Texas A&M, we stand for 4 straight hours. And we always stand ready. We stand up for others. Stand in when others won't. We don't stand by, and we won't stand still. Texas Aggies have always stood where duty required us to stand. We stand for something bigger than ourselves, and we stand stronger together. At Texas A&M University, we know what we stand for. Come stand with us.
All right, so that was the 60-second version of the Texas A&M PSA from 2024. This was my team's first national ad campaign, so it was a really exciting kind of moment for my team to kind of get together and realize, hey, somebody's giving us a shot to do something that's pretty big. And when we jumped into this project, I realized that it was one of those things that I wasn't going to be able to accomplish on my own. Our team wasn't big enough. We didn't have enough experience. We didn't honestly even understand who we needed to bring in to make this thing work. And so the first call I made in the whole project was to Aaron Reese. And I was like, hey, Aaron, you and I have connected on another project earlier in the year. How do we start this thing? And so, Aaron, when somebody like me calls you and says, let's get into this work, like, what's that? How do you start that conversation? What's the first thing your mind starts thinking about?
Deadlines. Like, when does it go to air? That's my first question. It's like, when do you need to deliver this to Texas A&M? And once we know that date, we back up everything from that. And then we realize, oh man, we need to be shooting in a week. And that's July 4th. So that was, I think, our biggest challenge is who is the best top tier talent that we can get, shooting in such a tight time. I don't think it was quite a week. We ended up about 2 weeks out. But it was a tight timeline. So it becomes like, who is our Avengers team? Like, let's start assembling the Avengers. As a producer, I feel like my skill set is socializing and it's communication and it's keeping up with people's lives and what they're up to, because really my job is to get the experts around the table and you guys figure it out. And then my team, production wise, we figure out how to make that happen for you. So there's a little bit of pressure off of my role always, and that I don't care necessarily about the creative outcome as much as I care about getting what you need to achieve that creative outcome.
That makes a lot of sense. And for me, when we jumped into this project, when we kind of got it rolling, it was this idea of I know enough about the creative side that we can pull that off. I wasn't really nervous about that, right? It was more the logistics side. And so I think I called you before we had really even landed on the concept from the client.
Yeah, we didn't have a budget. We didn't even have a concept. And that's what you and I were trying to figure out is, okay, without these things in place, do we have a shoot? And it's like, well, yeah, because what you do is you start getting your experts on hold. Let them know, hey, expert Justin, we've got a project coming up and it's, looks like a short runway. How's your flexibility? Could we potentially land this? And Andrew, one of our challenges is working with the university, working with our talent, but also making sure that it landed on a date that aligned with kind of our core people, one of which was Justin, who was in Mexico at the time when I called him. And to be clear, we didn't just pick up the phone and say we knew it was Justin. I mean, I sent you a ton of different DPs and a bunch of different, types of work. And you really, picked Justin out of that, having the look and feel that you wanted to accomplish in this. So that kind of became one of the first things that we do, even before budget and creative. It's like, when's the deadline? Can we even get this done? Let's just start holding this time. And that's kind of what we did. We put a blanket hold on the dates. I know I couldn't even come to the Scout, if you remember.
I do remember
I was in
that.
New York. And so, we had a hybrid Scout. We ended up doing 2 Scouts as a creative team, tech Scouts, technical Scouts. I assume everyone watching this knows about the film industry a little bit. But that's a little bit uncommon for a national commercial. Typically we would have the whole team, but essentially we had a technical Scout with the client and then we had a technical Scout with our crew, 2 different days. But that ended up being, I think, a lot better, and it helped us, work towards solving some of the unknowns that were still question marks even a few days out from shooting.
For sure. And I want to get to you, Justin, but just on the overall, called you Aaron, realized budget and timeline needed to be worked out immediately. And as soon as we realized, hey, this could happen, that's really when we went and worked as a team in a real collaborative way with the client at A&M. It really worked a little bit differently. Like, I was playing more the agency and the production team side of things, which I've learned is not always the most common way to do this.
And casting.
And casting, and
You did a lot.
we were all sort of working a whole bunch of different angles to make it work. But the whole idea for the ad, the title of it is Stand. And the whole concept came about from some market research the university had done to realize that the most popular Google search about Texas A&M University was, what does Texas A&M stand for? And when you watch it, we start off in Texas A&M stands for these things, we don't stand for these things. And each of the things that A&M stands for or stands about are core values of the university. And so really quickly it became, we know we want to showcase the core values of what Texas A&M is about, and we want to do that in a way that puts people in their space, kind of showcases who they are and what they do. And getting to assembling the Avengers crew, right? I think I'd be the Incredible Hulk if I could be any of them, if I'm honest, but we don't always get to pick our Avengers moment. And really, looking at the different DPs you sent me, I kind of saw them in two different groups, right? There was the group that probably plays more like I am, where it's like, I don't really care how this ends up. We just need to get it done. And there's value in that. And I'm the guy that's like, let's get this thing taken care of. But then it really quickly, Justin sort of rose to the top of that list for me of people who, after some conversations with you, Aaron, and looking at some of your work that you had sent me, Justin, I realized that you were the kind of person that was going to push back against me in some ways to say, we need to get this perfect before we do it, else we're not going to like what we came out with. And so, jumping into the project, Justin, what were your first thoughts? Like, what did you think when you got a call from Aaron? You're sitting on the beach in Mexico, kind of living the life down there, vagabond lifestyle. But what was that like when you got the call from us to jump in on this?
Yeah, no, I remember sitting in the kitchen in my apartment, and then I saw your email. I was like, oh, what's this? And then I was like, oh, wow, okay, let's go. But yeah, it was like pure excitement. I was like, okay, this is something. And then we had like a brief kind of discussion on like kind of what you were looking for. I think you sent me kind of like a treatment with like some portraits. You're kind of going for this portrait kind of like series of portraits, people in their space. So I really love that. And I love the fact that you had strong visuals to go off of and you knew what you wanted right away, which was really great. But you also, I feel like you were open to collaborating. And it did feel kind of like a dream come true. I'm like, oh, wow, this is happening. Like, and I was like, I guess I need to go back to the US now. And and then I hopped on like the first plane that I could with the schedule. And, but yeah, I was super excited.
Yeah, I when we got on that first call, you were asking me questions about this stuff in ways that I hadn't really understood somebody in your role would ask me about. I've got really talented people on my team, and I've worked with a bunch of really, really excellent people over my career. But what I wanted to do in this process was learn as much as I could, right? I fully understand that I don't know what I don't know in many, many moments of my life. And so the goal was, hey, Justin, bring on somebody that can help with lighting, bring on somebody that can help with the gear and kind of making sure everything works and is set. But yeah, the original concept was really, we knew we needed to shoot a bunch of different setups over the course of this piece to sell it. We were going to shoot the portrait images, and then we were going to pair that with B-roll that the university had on hand from years and years of stock footage that they've built up, both broadcast. We use some cell phone content. We use just whatever their team sort of had in their bank of footage. But really, Justin, we got to the point where we shot 16 different setups, and the goal was really to make sure that one setup to another, the visual through line was there. So talk about sort of how you prepped that visual through line and how you made sure that from one shot to another we were keeping things relatively consistent.
Yeah, so I think the first conversation with visuals I had was with Jeremy, our gaffer. We had worked in the past together on some things, and this is even before I came to the US. I was kind of prepping to leave, um, and he was working through kind of well, I sent him the visuals that you sent me, the kind of portraits, and we were kind of talking through our strategy and kind of like how we can keep things consistent. But I think the main thing we wanted to emphasize was keeping everything as motivated as possible, which is kind of like I feel like what I typically lean towards with a lot of like my work is like if there is a light on in the room, I want to make it feel like the light is coming from that light in the shot. So when I started looking at your images, I think there was one with like a person in like a shop. So it's like, how can I bring like a sense of like naturalism and yeah, believability to the light? And then talking with Jeremy, we were like, okay, we have a lot of setups. We have I don't know 3 days of production. Like how can we move through this as efficient as possible? And then knowing that A&M is a huge campus, we're gonna be doing a lot of production moves. So we were like, we want to create like sort of a formula for our setups in a way that we can sort of like not necessarily copy paste, but we have our strategy going in. And that's what the initial like conversation I had with Jeremy was about.
Yeah, and that was so key for me. We started with 3 days of production. We ended up adding a fourth at the end when the client realized they wanted some visuals we weren't able to accomplish on the first few days. But really quickly, the conversation with Aaron and Justin and I turned to, we had 30 plus people we needed to move around. So we had a couple of crew vans and then just cars to move production team around. We needed to get gear sort of locked down with a grip truck. I think we ended up having a production truck. We had a grip truck. We had a camera truck that also drove DIT around.
Yeah. We didn't even have 30 people on crew at first. Like, if we had all day long and we were just doing one setup, I know Justin would not have needed the team he had. One of the reasons we had such a large team for portraits was because of the aggressive moves that we had. I mean, it's like you've got this window of time to be in this building with this person, and then you got to be out. And so we're trying to not interrupt university operations. We want to, be their favorite film crew of all time. So a lot of those extra hands were just to help us
Yeah,
with efficiency.
and really the number of things we needed to do, again, it goes back to the client's goal was to showcase the university to an audience that was national that doesn't understand Texas A&M necessarily.
Yeah.
They've probably heard of Texas A&M. Like, I'm not sure either of you guys walked into this thing really understanding Texas A&M.
No, I was going to talk about that.
What was your perspective, Aaron? And I'm curious from you too, Justin.
Well, my perspective, I've done, higher education and university shoots before. So to me, I love it. It's great messaging. It's always got a big audience, lots of appeal. So the idea of doing a commercial for, a big university is exciting. I love the A&M culture, and I didn't know that until going into this project. I really became a wannabe Aggie, so maybe I'll sign up for a class one day so that I could be one. But what I found really interesting when we were on the golf carts driving around, one of the girls from the communications office was telling me about what A&M stands for, the whole idea of this and where it came from, and why they were so excited to be working with you, Andrew, because you're an Aggie. And I think that is a really interesting perspective that gives the piece a heart and soul that it would not have had perhaps if it didn't have the team behind it that cared so much about the message. And there were just so many little details. Like, I will remember the very last scene when we were doing the final shot of the people walking into Kyle Field. Y'all were so specific about making sure that the background talent is dressed like Aggies dress on game day. Because you were like, let me be clear. There are things that Aggies will do, and there are things Aggies don't do. And I'm the only, I've got to be the person here to tell you yay or nay. It's quicker for you to just look at a wardrobe option and say, that's totally an Aggie thing, than it was for you to tell us what Aggie land is. You know what I mean? So it's like dresses with boots. Yes. I remember that very clearly. And so I think having that kind of knowledge, that insight into A&M culture was really helpful for getting the final piece to be as appealing as it was to Aggies.
The saying goes around Aggieland, and Aggies listening to this will have heard it a million times, and other people probably get annoyed by it. But the saying goes, from the outside looking in, you can't understand Texas A&M, and from the inside looking out, you can't explain it. And so every university has their things that they're very unique about, that they're known for. And A&M, as much as anybody, leans into that in good ways and probably ways that other people give us a hard time about. But the truth is that there are those things that on an ad like this, the client was very, very clear, and this was a huge goal in that collaborative work environment of, we've got to reach a national audience. And my point was, you have to also play to the home team. And that playing to the home team really played out in two things. And I know we're going to get to the shot discussion here in a minute, Justin, but after I hear what you thought of A&M and what your takeaway was, but the two things we really went into were the baseball players in the dugout. There had been a bunch of controversy about the baseball team and the coach leaving, and those two dudes, Jace Lavalette and Hayden Schott, standing together, and Hayden was looking lovingly at Jace. He would probably not admit that, but it looked like it on camera.
You directed that. You directed that.
Yeah, I did that. I Jedi mind tricked him. But the other line was Texas Aggies. There's that other university over in Austin, which they do really great stuff. They do good things, and they call themselves the Texas Longhorns. And Aggies for years have gotten annoyed by the fact that we'll call ourselves Texas A&M Aggies, and the truth is we are Texas Aggies. That is who we are here. And so just those two things were really intended to be that nod to the home team, that, hey, this is who we are. We understand Aggieland and the Aggie culture. But Justin, what were your thoughts about Aggieland, and just kind of what did you walk away from thinking?
Yeah, I mean, I've always heard about A&M growing up, and actually my aunt is an Aggie. So I knew that there was some kind of school spirit. But I mean, going in, like that first scout, I started to learn about this culture, but yeah, no, the school spirit, the colors, and I was really excited
The
to
colors? Hold on. Is that a real answer, Justin?
yeah, not a bunch of colors,
You're
but
inspired by the colors?
I wasn't inspired by the colors. I was inspired by
You were inspired like we all were. Hey, this is going to play on ABC and primetime television, and there's going to be 10 million people watching it. Which, look, that's not a bad way to approach a project, right?
Yeah.
We've got to walk in with something to excite us, right?
Yeah, but no, I was inspired by all the locations too. Like we had so many different places to shoot. Like, the colors of all the diverse locations we had. Yeah, with the wave tank and the study room, the flag room. Yeah, we just like had so many options and places to shoot, and I love that going in, like you knew where you wanted to shoot too. Like you had that, like being an Aggie, knowing the perspective of like where would this play the best. Like if we were just going in this blind, like this hallway, I'm like I don't know. Like I'm glad that you had that like perspective, like knowing.
Yeah, it was definitely an effort between what the A&M team brought and what I brought. There were some places we would have loved to shoot. We just couldn't work it out. We couldn't figure that out in the amount of time we had. But we did the best with what we could. And what I loved about the both of you is walking into each location, you both walked in with sort of your own take on what we were going to do. And so there's 3 shots we wanted to kind of work through today. The first one, I'm going to let Aaron tee us off here, Justin, so that you can kind of share your screen and show us the lighting plot and the actual image we came away with. But the first one was Olson Field. Aaron, I'm not sure if you remember this one, but before the hurricane was hitting, they were supposed to be in the middle of a baseball camp. There was going to be hundreds of smaller children running around that field, and it just wasn't going to be possible for us to be in the dugout like we had wanted. And so we were trying to pivot. But when you walked onto that location, like, what do you remember thinking from a production standpoint? You're never somebody that says no, but maybe you were somebody that said, I don't know what we're going to do here. How do we make this work?
if you recall, we are in the middle of July shooting. And so anytime we're exterior, my biggest concern is how can I keep the crew alive for the shot if we're going to be outside in the middle of this field for an hour and a half? So my biggest challenge is always load in, load out. Fortunately, Olson Field was pretty easy. I mean, it's set up for trucks to come in and unload, and so we could pull up our grip truck right there, almost to the first base dugout, which was fabulous. We ended up shooting on the third base dugout, but we loaded in at every entrance essentially. We had camera loading in at third base side, G&E loading in at first base side, and then in the clubhouse is where production all came in and cast. It was awesome getting to set up camp in the clubhouse there, because that's a pretty unique experience for Aggies. I know a lot of people don't have the experience necessarily of going to the Olson Field clubhouse. It's like a private thing, isn't it?
They don't let people like me in there typically.
Well, guess what? They did. We got you in, Andrew. And it was really cool to experience that and be in a space that is really revered by the university, and it's world class. So it was cool to be there and have that experience for like an hour and a half, and then it's like we got to pack up and move out. So I remember that one being challenging because it was extremely hot for crew in that dugout, and I remember we went through packs of those cold wraps, Gatorades, waters. We had fans. It was kind of crazy. And I remember that we were going back and forth with, do we even want a video village? It's so bright and hot. And it's funny that ended up being the case, because during the scout, we were planning to shoot in the batting cage room because we thought that it was going to be tons of kids at the camp on the field. So I think we really lucked out with that.
Absolutely. So Justin, can you share that lighting plot and kind of what that final image looked like, and kind of walk us through, start with the camera package, lens package, kind of talk us through some of the technical side of things and what we ended up trying to pull off there.
But yeah, so camera and lens package was a mini LF with Cook speed pancros. I'm a big fan of the Cook look, and I felt like that would have really
Which
was
we
like,
got those overnighted from Denver the night before the shoot, if you remember that.
yeah, that was insane.
How
We
much
almost
did I
were
pay
like,
for that, Aaron? What was the cost of getting those on a plane? We had like
They didn't charge us to get them on a plane. They just were like, we need to know right now if you need these Cook lenses. You got 30 minutes to make the decision.
I thought
And
we
we
had
were
to pay
so
for it.
over budget. We were so over budget. I'm like, Justin, you don't need this.
that was also in the middle of the hurricane too. I had no power. I
Yeah,
had no
well,
internet. I had no
you
Wi-Fi.
had no idea what Andrew and I were dealing with that day. So
Yeah.
to be like, over Justin be like, can we get the Cooks? I'm like, yeah. But it worked out, and I'm actually really glad we did it. And you know what? It was Andrew who had your back on that decision. Because
Yeah,
I'm like, we'll be fine with the cheaper ones. And he's like, no,
Yeah.
this is what we hired Justin for. Let's do it.
yeah,
So-
I was really surprised when I got that. That's like probably the best news you can get in a hurricane. You're gonna get Cook lenses.
Cooks are coming.
Yeah. Yeah, so we shot on the Cooks, had the speed pancros. I don't know how you want me to get like nitty gritty with like
Talk
technical
us through just the
specs,
lighting
right?
setup we're seeing here. You've got this
Okay.
lighting plot
Okay,
that you
cool.
worked through. Like, what was the ultimate goal here? And then we can look at that final image and kind of how that played out.
Okay, yeah. So I mean, basically, we were playing with the sun. So like with like day exteriors, I always try to keep the sun at their back as much as possible, like backlight them. You can control it a lot better. Yeah, actually, so originally I plotted to have like a large 4K source, but since we had our sun, I didn't do it. It was basically controlling it and softening what was there, because we shot at the perfect time of day, thankfully, but we were kind of like chasing the sun, so it was just controlling it with this quarter grid, and things like shifted a lot on that day. We were kind of like basically moving, following the sun. So yeah, it was big 12x12, basically softening up what was here. These were our two guys were. And basically just trying to take away light that was bouncing off of the dugout, because we had all this, all these seats, we had all this stuff in the background, and I was really trying to expose, which you'll see in the final image for the background, because we have this beautiful, these lines that were like basically like cutting right through the two players' head. We had Home of the Aggies in the background. I thought that would have been cool to basically keep in the background. So Yeah, this is like the most simple setup I feel like out of all of them, but basically it was like two large soft, uh, basically silks. That was really it, and then neg.
All right, Justin, can we actually look at that image? What we came out of that shot with? And again, this is Jace
Yeah.
Lavalette and Hayden Schott. They both play baseball for Texas A&M. Hayden had actually just gotten his eligibility cleared to come back for another year with the team. And Jace is a guy that is projected anywhere, from number 1 to the top 5 in the MLB draft this year. So that was a pretty big win for us to get these dudes who are not only beloved, but are really, really good ball players to be in the shot.
Yeah, to start off, we have on camera right, we have basically this solid that's taking away light. That was what we were kind of planning for. And that was just to basically give shadow towards camera, because I like to shoot with a far side key, basically shooting into the shadow at all times, kind of like create some depth and like three dimensionality, if that's a word. That out. Anyway, so yeah, basically our big soft sources are right off camera right here, kind of basically softening up what we had. And then in the back we have another one, basically kind of softening up the seats in the background. And that was really it. This is like basically really, really simple. And I'm looking at the behind the scenes photos, and we actually did have like a bounce just right under camera as well, or a silver surfer as we call it. And I can clean this up as well. I'm kind of like just scribbling
No,
on
this is
my
perfect.
iPad.
I want your scribbles. I want to kind of show what it looks like just from your perspective. But one of the things that really lined up well with this shot specifically is that one of the 6 core values from Texas A&M is the value of loyalty. And so the behind the scenes, or the inside baseball of this one, if you will, is that the coach from the team had been with the A&M baseball team as they went to the College World Series. As they made it to the final round, they went 1-1 against Tennessee, and there was, as they call it, the rubber match game, where whoever won ended up winning the national title. A&M just didn't play as well in that final game, and leading into that final game, the coach had been asked from one of the reporters here covering at Texags, was he going to stay? There was sort of this blow up moment, and people were thinking A&M kind of overreacted, but there was all this smoke about the coach leaving. He actually ended up leaving just after they lost the College World Series against Tennessee. And there was all this hubbub about all that going on about a month before we shot this piece. They ended up hiring a coach that had been on the team as an assistant that same year. And these guys, Jason Hayden, were 2 guys that stepped up and said, we're coming back to play another season at Texas A&M University. And the fact that they did that lined up just beautifully. The client, Texas A&M, really pushed to have loyalty be the line that they were featured on. And when the ad went out, when everything played, the college sports media world definitely caught on to that line. There's some different articles on different services that are out there. Did Texas A&M plan this? Was this something that had been anticipated? Did they know what they were doing? Of course we knew what we were doing, guys. Like, this was obviously a planned moment. It just worked out really, really well timing-wise to kind of put it all together for us there. So, Justin, what's the next one you wanted to talk through?
Let's go to the wave tank.
Yes.
Yeah, this is my favorite.
Wave tank.
One of my favorites.
So the Wave Tank is on West Campus at Texas A&M. If you haven't been there, what they do is they have a giant wave producing pool with a 50 or 60 foot deep well, and they'll test scale models of offshore oil rigs. So you'd imagine they've had every massive major oil company in the world come in there from time to time and test different platforms, floating and secured type of platforms. And so the idea was we wanted to show some scientific work, some engineering work, and when the opportunity came up to work with these guys, not only were they on board with it, they were excited, and I think maybe for Aaron and I were most excited when they said that we could do lunch in their conference room. So we had an easy air conditioned place to feed the team the day we were in there. But what's this lighting plot look like, Justin? It's pretty involved, as I remember.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
this was a challenging location because we had a huge space, and I'll show some behind the scenes. I actually forgot to show the behind the scenes from the baseball one. So yeah, so we had like a really big space. So like, how are we gonna light this? But what I kind of noticed is that we have this big, basically reflective pool behind us, which I was like, let's use this to our advantage. Um, so first thing we did, I'm just gonna go with the background as well. We'll start with that, and then work forward. But we had this big 4K basically that we got, and I really wanted to create some like reflections in the background. Uh, like I said, giving kind of like some kind of like motivated light. So this basically 4K was bouncing off, which you can see that is basically hitting the wave tank, and it's adding these reflections that are right behind her head. So it looks like light's basically coming from above, but there's basically a big source, camera right. Um, we also kept one challenge with the location is that these overhead lights took like about 10 minutes to turn on or something like that, and we couldn't dim them. I don't remember, but they took a while to turn on. Um, so we kept those on, and I kind of like exposed for those. Yeah. So actually, I'm gonna jump to her fill. That was a really fun part. But basically, I was like, okay, we want to do that sort of soft key, like that kind of matched the portrait that you were going for. So we basically had a 1200 bouncing into this 6 by ultra bounce. But the fun part was her fill, and we basically I wanted to create like a lighting gag that would match the reflections in the background. So we basically had this 300 with, I think it was probably with like a spotlight attachment, but we had like a little pool of water and basically shot it down to like create these like this little dapple of reflection on her eye. And I thought it gave this like nice little texture and made it seem like there was a little pool of water. Like, I mean, basically it would look like it was coming from behind her, which I thought was really cool. So yeah, I was really proud of that. And yeah, that was
You guys
basically
used
it.
something from Crafty. Do you remember on set? What did you ask for that you were like, we need this, let's try it? And then when I saw y'all bring it in and use it on her face, I was like, that's amazing. What was it? Was it foil from the burrito or something?
No, I think it was like a crafty tin that holds the burritos or something like that. And we just,
Oh, that's right. It was a chafing
yeah,
dish. It was a silver chafing
yeah. So
dish.
we basically did like a skip bounce into her as her fill. And would create these like
Yeah.
nice little reflection.
Which you planned that on site. I mean, you were like, wait, I think this might work.
Yeah, basically. I mean, we had the idea to do it before.
That's
Yeah,
right. You asked me in advance to have it on site for you.
yeah. And
But I just thought that was such a great use of
yeah,
On
yeah,
it,
I think it was cool.
honestly, walking into this project, I said at the beginning of the show, like I hadn't worked with a big crew before. I hadn't worked with people who just knew more tricks of the trade, if you will, on what works really well. And this was honestly one of those moments for me where I was like, this is why you bring in a team of professionals to do a thing. This is why you bring in a guy like Justin, who has guys like Jeremy and Jeff on set, who have seen the way enough things are done. And really, Justin, what that goes back to is we came into this wanting to motivate each of these shots, wanting to make sure that not only were they in their space, not only were they standing for everything Texas A&M was about, but that it looked like it was something that you literally just walked into and saw this woman standing there. She's the dive master out at the wave tank. She's a very smart, very talented person. But this idea that that's not really what the wave tank looks like, guys. It's a dark, kind of dank room. It's not pretty when you walk in. It's really impressive just as a space in general. But looking at that light coming into the pool with that 4K, looking at that dappled light on her face, it's way more beautiful than it was in real life. And I think it was that kind of intentionality that meant we were really able to come in and showcase this university in a way that I think we were all really proud of. At least I was really proud of.
Yeah, and that room was really cool. I mean, there was no Wi-Fi. If we wanted to use Wi-Fi, we had to plug in. They had to, bring IT in to do things special. It's very locked down, that facility. We had an aggressive safety meeting. Or I shouldn't say aggressive. It was scary. It's like, don't fall in the water, guys. It could be bad. But the loading was amazing. Like, we could bring all of our trucks right there to the back with the lift gates. And then I remember them just being underwater and you guys having to call for action underwater to get the waves that you wanted above ground. It was really cool just to see how everything in that room had to work together to get that
Yeah.
shot.
I remember we were looking at, there was an underground viewing room,
Yeah,
and I was like,
bubble.
maybe we can shoot a light from under the water and try to get these reflections.
Right.
Yeah, but it was a very tiny little space, and it was like, it's probably not worth it. Probably we need something, a bigger storage to
But
get
you
through
got
there.
lights in the waters. But was it their
They
lights?
had some fixtures they could
Underwater?
float into the water, and they were able to drop a few sort of pings in the shot.
Yeah. I don't think we ended up,
Oh.
yeah, we ended up doing it, but
Mhm.
yeah. And we also like, in the background, there's like these little fluorescents too. We ended up dimming those. And I remember we were going back and forth a bit about the lights behind her head. So it was about finding like just the right amount of light behind her to like lead your
Mhm.
eye, lead
Mhm.
the lines that are her eyes. I'm always looking for lines or like something to lead your eye to her eye, and which kind of like draws in the composition. So I'm really proud of this.
And honestly, I love working with good people, right? And the team at the Wave Tank, I don't know if you guys are going to see this, Jared and all of his team, but really appreciate the help and really appreciate the assistance you were able to give us there. I know it was they got a call from me on a Friday afternoon. I was like, could we do this? And Jared and I over there had worked together in the past, and so we were able to make it happen, and they were very cool about that. All right, Justin, we got one more shot that I wanted to talk through, or that you really want to talk through, I think. And this was in the administration building, which, if you're an Aggie, is at the very front of campus. It's a historic, beautiful space. And one of the things I remember most about this, Justin, is you guys convinced us that you needed to set up a giant menace arm to fly. What was it, a 600 with a lantern there in the space? So kind of talk us through that.
Yeah, I mean, when we first came in, I was like, they have these big stained glass windows that I was like, I want to take advantage of these, and I want to try to get detail into them. So, um, like you were saying, I really wanted to bring up the level in this room because we were trying to expose for those windows. So we had this big 1200D on a basically a giant menace arm that was basically giving fill to the background. Um, so that was kind of like her backlight slash fill. Um, and basically, we also had this warm edge, which you can kind of see slightly on her right, which is this uh like warm. I guess I actually don't remember the source, but that was like a kind of like a last minute ad. Um, but our key was that 4K, basically doing a book play right here into an ultra bounce. Um, and and yeah, I mean, it wasn't a too wasn't that complicated of a setup, but I loved how it kind of all came together, and the lines of the word really were just a beautiful location, which did a lot of the heavy lifting for us as far as like the composition. But um, let me show some behind the scenes here.
There's Matt.
There's Matt. There's your head.
There's my bald
Uh,
head, my balding head. Thanks for that. Appreciate
Beasley.
it.
Beasley.
Beasley's
yeah,
made it in here.
yeah. But yeah, so you
Good.
can kind of see that giant menace arm. It's overhead. And yeah, so we have that ultra bounce, and it looks like we ended up softening it again on the close up.
Yeah, I think
Um,
I remember it was pinging a little bit too hard off the side of her face, and you guys walked in that
yeah,
other piece there.
it her skin was just so like smooth and nice. I feel like it really it was really easy to make her look really good.
One
Um,
yeah, for sure. One of the things I remember about this setup specifically, this is the building where all of the client team works out of. So they're like, hey, we can definitely do something in this space. And turns out that their boss works up on the top floor of the building, and so I was able to quickly run up there and shake his hand and tell him he should probably come down and take a look at it. But when you look at this behind the scenes photo with the weird angle of my head there were people kind of lining that top balcony area, just kind of looking at what was going on. That is definitely one thing that's true about moving around with the two of you and all of the people we were with, that we definitely drew a crowd kind of wherever we went as a part of this project. But this is honestly one of my favorite shots, and the client was able to find that book that we put in her hand, that deep color maroon with the embossed gold lettering. I feel like that really helped to sell it as well, that she's a student kind of going to class and doing her thing there on campus.
Well, and this is a historic building, right? It's one of the oldest buildings on campus. So loading in and setting up, we had to just be extremely careful. We had one elevator. Almost the majority of stuff came up through those stairs that you see. But the crew, we had a little bit longer load in and load out because of that one little elevator that they had.
Yeah, that was a definite learning experience, and shout out to our first AC Matthew. I kind of called him out on focusing, and I realized that you never do that with somebody who pulls focus every day of his life. He's probably more right than you're going to be. So sorry about that, Matthew. Thanks for having some patience with me, and as I clearly was learning more about working with guys like you on these kinds of projects. But
Yeah, I just realized that this is probably the only time I've done a book light onto a book.
the inception of book lights. That's the way to go. All right, so sort of in wrapping this up, I had just a couple closing thoughts, and these were more just moments that I thought were pretty funny as a part of the shoot. Anytime you're moving 30 plus people around, and there's a campus with 50 to 70,000 people on it at a given time, there's going to be some. As they say in that Tom Cruise movie about NASCAR, rubbing is racing. But one of the shots we got was a last minute addition with the Solar Racing team, and it's one of the most beautiful sort of historic, gross old shops on main campus. And we pivoted and were able to go there late in the day, but Justin and the crew come to me and like, hey, we want to fill this with smoke. We want to haze this out to give us some atmosphere in the air. And I was like, great, that's going to be super cool. They had a hazer, though, that was bigger than any I had ever used. I come from the world of like small DJ shows, really. And so the hazers I'm used to are kind of janky. This thing, though, cranked out a ton of smoke, and it really did sell the shot of this haze in the space. And Peter, our art director, was able to kind of grind on some sparks in the background to make it look really cool. But we wrap up the shot, everybody's loading out, and there's no smoke detectors, as I understand, in the main shop. But as soon as somebody opened the door and left it open, all that haze just billowed into the building, and it set off the fire alarm. Then the client got to talk to the fire department that came to check it out, and it turns out that there was a whole email that went out to every building proctor on campus, basically saying, look out for these guys as they kind of come around and are doing stuff. If they're in your building, you need to watch out. Look, we're learning. We were on a short timeline. Everybody ended up being cool, but it was definitely one of those moments that I'm always going to remember, the time that I got blasted out to every building proctor at Texas A&M.
The guy that came, though, he was a legit veteran. Whoever was in charge of that building, because he was like, who are you guys? What are you doing here? He was kind of mad. He was about to like lay down the wrath, and he was like, "Do you guys need a ride back? Where are you guys staying?" It was really funny.
But then
like,
you and one of the people from the client team, Michelle, were able to just be who you are as human beings, and you would never send me into that moment. He's just going to scream at me, but you ladies were able to kind of talk him down, and he ended up being super cool about the whole thing.
He was so cool, and so was everyone on A&M. We weren't ostracized for setting off the fire alarm. We had the greatest engineering minds in the world saying, this is so cool, and when the leadership comes and is like, what's going on here? Oh, okay, all right. Like,
yeah, one of my favorite parts of that.
Everything's okay. We're good.
Yeah.
Lesson learned, though. I think that makes us even more powerful for the next shoot.
Oh, I was just going to say, one of my favorite parts about that shot was those sparks that are in it. Like, I was kind of a last minute decision. I'm like, can you do sparks? And like Peter's doing them like up at an angle, so they like basically go into the frame.
Yeah. I will say one other thing I learned from this shoot, riding around on the golf cart with Michelle, is that it's a tradition in A&M, if you're on the golf cart, to say howdy to people. It's howdy.
Oh, you say so howdy whether you're on the golf cart or just walking. That's the official greeting of Texas A&M.
That's true. Maybe that's it. But when I was on the golf cart with the client, I was like, oh, howdy. howdy. You just start saying howdy, and so now I've incorporated howdy into my vernacular, and I specifically blame Michelle for that.
That's awesome. All right, the last quick note I had, and this is more of a let's never do this again, Aaron. We had an amazing crafty guy. His name's Anoka. He covered the first 3 days of production. We're over in the White Walker Band Hall building. That was a beautiful shot. Our bass drummer did a really good job kind of working with us and doing what we needed to do. But we're wrapping that out, and all of a sudden, Anoka's coming around with a composed charcuterie board, passing out meats and cured meats and cheeses.
I'm sorry, Andrew. That's a very common crafty.
Never bring cured meats and cheeses on a State of Texas shoot again, please. Let's just keep it to
Shout out to Hearts Barbecue.
Shout out to Hearts Barbecue and all of their work, but we just need to read the room a bit. I was like, get this charcuterie board out of here, please. Not only is it delicious, it's looking kind of weird. But no, I really appreciated that, and in closing here, guys, I just wanted to say thank you so much for joining us on the Filmworks Way podcast. It really does mean a lot to me that not only have we been able to do some good work together, but the fact that I can call both of you a close friend of mine at this point, and that I know that you guys are cheering us on as we push forward with Texas Filmworks. And please know that our team and our crew is cheering you on as you both do really amazing work in the world of production and in the great state of Texas here. And so good luck, Godspeed, and everything you have coming up. So that's a wrap on this episode of the Filmworks Way. If you've got thoughts, questions, or just want to argue about the best kind of gaff tape, leave a comment, hit us up on Instagram or LinkedIn, and be sure to subscribe wherever you listen. And if you would, drop us a 5-star review. It really helps. Until next time, keep pushing forward.